Hi, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. I am Andy Shepherd. I'm the clinical lead here at ReadyCare. And in today's session, we're going to be talking about artificial sweeteners. So we get this question quite a bit, actually. We get comments and feedback from patients who'll say, I'm using this and it says it has no sugar in it, it's sugar-free. And quite often that can be an intentional way of putting those words together. Sugar-free does not always mean harm-free at all, actually. And artificial sweeteners are not all created equal. So in today's session, what I'm going to talk about is what the research says in terms of artificial sweeteners and weight gain, artificial sweeteners and sugar cravings. And we'll just outline which are the better artificial sweeteners to choose and which ones are the ones that you should probably avoid when we look at the research. And there's a very obvious one beginning with A, I won't spoil it yet, that we definitely want to avoid from a brain health, cardiovascular health, and overall general health point of view. Okay, so first things first, when we look at artificial sweeteners are things that give, needless to say, and obvious from the word itself or the term, a sweet kind of a taste to something, but they're artificial. So first of all, starting with the worst of the worst, we have sugar, fructose, all of those sort of things. So sugar itself, funnily enough, in very small amounts, and I mean very small amounts, so not consuming them all day, every day, sugar is not the worst thing you can have. So actual sugar arguably is not as bad for you as some of the artificial sweeteners. Having said that, I mean in really small amounts. Like I mean just having, a quarter of a cake or just having half a biscuit. But the problem with sugar is that the endorphin release we get from it has, causes that kind of what a friend of mine refers to as a taste of more. It kind of says to your brain, do it again. So it's very difficult to eat in small amounts and not compulsively eat. I often remember standing at the press and swearing to myself, this is years ago when I used to eat way more sugar and carbs. I've been ketogenic for about 5 or 6 years now. But I remember standing at a press and thinking, I know how bad sugar is for me. I've read all the research. I'm under no illusions. I'm definitely not going to eat more than 2 biscuits. And then standing there 8 biscuits later, just kind of wondering what happened, that my brain just said, the hell with it, just go mad. You hit that kind of self-destruct button when you have sugar. And some people have more of a pronounced addictive response to sugar. I have an off the charts, personally, addictive response to sugar. So I just avoid it for the most part. So there's no doubt that sugar is deleterious to human health. It's probably is definitely driving cancer and obesity. Sugar and refined carbohydrates, which are essentially the same thing when they boil down in the blood. It definitely contributes to Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, many of the hormone-positive cancers in particular. It drives most of the disease that we see in the Western world. And that's a huge statement, but it's absolutely true. So about 65% of all healthcare costs go towards diet-related illnesses that are rooted in something known as hyperinsulinemia, high levels of insulin in the body, or metabolic syndrome, which are the same thing. So sugar and carbohydrate in the diet. Most of our healthcare costs are going towards that. So it's not a stretch to say that sugar and processed carbohydrate is driving most of the chronic disease, or most of the disease actually that we see in the Western world. So we know sugar and carbohydrate should be avoided. So we think, well, artificial sweeteners are definitely a complete get out of jail card because they're not sugar. And they're not, but they come with a whole host of potential pitfalls and things that you should avoid. So some of the ones that you'll hear more commonly are stevia in the low carb sphere for sure. Stevia is a plant-based sweetener that's derived, I believe, from the cactus root or something to do with a cactus anyway. It's not. It's a plant. Stevia is a leaf that occurs naturally in nature, and you can derive a kind of a very sweet taste from it. It's 5, 6, 7 times sweeter than sugar, so you only need a tiny amount of it, and you see it comes in the small little droplets, almost like Canderel used to do years ago. It's not particularly harmful in small amounts, but personally, I don't like it. It is an endocrine disruptor, so it does affect your hormones, and it gives off a kind of a strange bitter aftertaste to it. So stevia is one that it's not the most harmful, but personally, I don't like it. That's just my own personal take on it. Xylitol is another one, and xylitol is one that actually is derived from the bark of a tree, I believe. So xylitol, spelled like xylophone, Xylitol, is sweet, but still elicits about 40 or 50% of a blood sugar response compared to sugar. So we'd say, for example, you have 2 spoons of it, it's roughly the same as 1 spoon of sugar, even though it's as sweet as sugar, if that makes sense. So it's an okay replacement. Erythritol is another one that's pretty good. Erythritol is not bad. And then the other one that is good is monk fruit sweetener. monk fruit, or allulose, allulose. Now, the ones to be careful with are the kind of the aspartame-based sweeteners. So the story around aspartame and I'm trying to Monsanto is really worth looking up. If you want to go down a rabbit hole and think, how in the name of God did we end up with this food in every second sugar-free product? And we know that it's a carcinogen. We know that it is, or maybe a carcinogen. I have to be careful. May cause cancer. Is definitely a known neurotoxin, so it's bad for your brain. Yet it's in every single diet drink and diet yogurt and sugar-free food in the food supply. So you kind of wonder, how did we get to a point that we put this into lots of foods and we think it's a carcinogen, we think it causes cancer, and we know that it damages the brain. So how did it end up to food? So look up the story. I'm not going to get into it. I don't want to get in any trouble. But do look up Monsanto, who are the food group, the investment that went in towards allowing aspartame, which is it's a waste product actually from a manufacturing process that just happened to taste very sweet. So we put this chemical into loads of foods and we know it's terrible for you. Now, I'm guilty of having it every now and again. Once or twice a week, I'll have like a Diet Coke or a 7-Up Free or something like that. But it is not something we should be eating in large volumes, if at all. So let's take a look at some of the sweeteners here and how they kind of rank in terms of the better and worse ones. So the worst ones we know are things like high fructose corn syrup. So that's just the sugar, we'll say, quote unquote sugar, that's in full sugar drinks. Things like brown sugar, white sugar. It amazes me that people still think that brown sugar is better than white sugar. They're roughly the same in terms of the glycemic index. Fruit juice concentrate. So fruit juices that have been squeezed, that have the fiber taken out. So I'm not talking about smoothies per se, even though smoothies are dangerous as well. But fruit juices like orange juice, apple juice, grape juice, all that sort of stuff, especially in concentrate form, but in any form for that matter, are fructose, which is a particularly harmful sugar. It's not just that it's different to sugar and it's fine. It's particularly harmful because of what it does in the liver. And of course, type 2 diabetes actually begins in the liver. So you definitely want to avoid fruit juices. As a general rule, do not drink your fruit ever. Coconut sugar, no better than normal sugar. Dates, figs, dried fruit, no better than normal sugar. In fact, arguably worse. Honey, again, we have this notion that if something is organic and naturally occurring, that it must be good for us. But that's a silly way to look at things, because technically opioids like heroin are kind of naturally occurring in the form of the poppy plant. They've just been refined a little bit. So we can't say that something that comes from nature is just automatically better for us. It's not necessarily at all. So maple syrup, white sugar, brown sugar, agave syrup, honey, they're all sugar. Now, I know we have agave and honey in some of our recipes, but it's a tiny amount that goes into a granola recipe, for example, that's spread across 10 servings. So again, the dose is the poison, as the expression goes. So if you're having a lot of it, that's dangerous. Very small amounts of it, not the end of the world. Now, I'm not going to mention any brand names here, but aspartame, dextrose, and sucralose should definitely be avoided. So you can see in the yellow, the blue, and the pink packet here. I don't want to get in any trouble or mention any brand names, even though they are on the picture. But the ingredients in them, as opposed to the brand name itself, is what I'm talking about here. So aspartame, sucralose, and dextrose are definitely best avoided. The better ones then are stevia, erythritol, and monk fruit. They're the better ones. Now, funnily enough, if you look at your blood sugar response, aspartame doesn't actually spike your blood sugar levels. So Diet Coke and things like that won't affect your blood sugar levels. So when I talk about it being very dangerous for you or very bad for your health, I'm not necessarily talking in relation to blood sugar control. I'm talking about overall levels of inflammation, its ties to being a potential carcinogen, so causing cancer, and also the known and well-documented neurotoxic effect it has. So the toxic effect it has in your brain. So if you have kids now, for example, and you're thinking, well, I'll give them, 7-Up Free or Diet Coke because that's not too bad, you would be much better off not doing that. Much better off. I suspect in time it'll emerge much more in the literature over the next number of years that actually it's terrible for you. Personally, again, you can't live like a monkey either, or most people choose not to, I should say. So I personally choose to have like a Diet Coke or two or a 7-Up Free every week. If I'm out for a meal, for example, or if I'm getting something on the go, I might get a Diet Coke with it. But having said that, 90% of the liquid I drink tends to be either coffee with cream or sparkling water. So I tend to kind of avoid the aspartame based stuff if I can. So some of the other research that's really interesting that I wanted to talk about today is the fact that the reason we want to avoid sugar from a blood sugar and weight gain point of view is that, so I'm speaking about sweeteners and weight gain here, is that the mechanism behind this is that sugar causes your blood sugar levels to go up, obviously enough, because it's sugar, so does carbohydrate. And then you have a hormone called insulin, which you'll be sick of me talking about at this stage if you're following my work for any length of time. Insulin is a hormone that's responsible for two things in particular: lowering your blood sugar levels and driving glucose into the cells and storing fat. So when your blood sugar levels go high, that hormone insulin goes high and you tend to gain weight. Now, sugar and carbohydrate are not the only things that can spike your insulin level. In fact, what the research has shown over the last number of years is that the taste of something sweet alone, not even without even ingesting the sugar, the taste of something sweet alone, whether it's sugar or not, activates a mesolimbic pathway in the brain. And that pathway says there's sugar coming in, produce insulin. So without even actually having it coming in. And I was talking to someone about this last week, and I was saying that technically artificial sweeteners can make you fat. They absolutely can if you have too much of them, or even just a small amount of them if you're sensitive to them. And he said to me, well, but how can the thought of something cause a physiological response? He said, I don't believe that can happen, that thinking about something can cause a physiological response. And I said to him, have you ever watched a horror movie? So check your heart rate when you're watching a horror movie. You know on a visceral and a conscious level that you're not in any danger. But because of the data that's coming into the brain, your body says, we might be at risk here. So again, you know on a conscious level that you're not at risk. Cortisol goes up, adrenaline goes up, your blood vessels tighten and restrict, your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up. So again, it doesn't actually have to be a physical stimulus, but it can be a kind of anticipatory response that your body has. So this particular anticipatory response is known as the cephalic phase insulin response. And the cephalic phase says that if you even look at stuff that's really sugary based for long enough, if you watch it on TV, you know, the way you might get that tingly feeling and your brain goes, oh, I want that, your body will actually start to produce insulin. There was a really good study done with athletes, cyclists, where they give them energy gels, and energy gels, of course, are full of sugar, and you see their blood sugars going up and their insulin levels going up dramatically. And then 30 minutes later, they give them a sugary tasting substance that just has an artificial sweetener and it has no actual sugar in it. They swish it around in their mouths and spit it out. And this was a brilliant study. So the reason they swish it around in their mouths was you can't make the argument that there's something in the sweeteners that's spiking insulin. So swish it in their mouth, don't swallow it, spit it out. And the taste of that sugary thing alone, sweet taste in the mouth alone, caused that insulin response. So their insulin levels shot up. So again, mechanistically, we know no artificial sweeteners will cause weight gain. The other thing they do that's really important to acknowledge is they reinstate and bump up your sugar threshold. So what I mean by that is if you eat a lot of artificial sweeteners and you keep bombarding your body with the taste of something sweet, the threshold beyond which it takes for you to feel like you had something sweet bumps up and up and up and up. So if you're always drinking Diet Cokes and having sugar-free yogurts and things like that, your body will say, we're used to that sugary taste, and you require a more sugary food to be able to taste something sweet. So what I'm saying there is that even though you're not eating something sugary, your body is used to eating sugary things. So what'll happen there is that, are used to the feeling of eating sugary things. What'll happen there is that you'll feel like you're eating sugar all the time. And so the sugar cravings will be reinstated. So the more often you have Diet Coke, and again, there's literature to show this too, or, and sorry, I'm not just picking, when I say Diet Coke, I mean Diet Cola. I don't mean any particular brand. It can be a lemon and lime diet drink, or it can be a cola diet drink. I'm not using any brand names here in particular at all, because they all have aspartame in them for the most part. So that will increase your sugar cravings. So a couple of things here I just want to kind of summarize on. Let me just bring up a couple of banners here. So we know the research has shown that sweeteners can cause weight gain. That is an absolute given. And they also increase the sugar threshold. So the more artificial sweeteners you have, the more of a sugar craving you're going to have, and the more sugar you will need to feel that kind of endorphin release that you get from sugar. So they're not good from that point of view. The better sweeteners are stevia, erythritol, xylitol, and monk fruit. And this is by a mile. Now, my personal favorite is erythritol because it doesn't have that stevia kind of soury kind of taste to it. Xylitol is definitely the best tasting. It tastes identical to sugar, but there's still a bit of a blood sugar response from it. I know I checked my own blood sugar levels and it bumped up like 30-40% what sugar would have done, whereas erythritol and stevia didn't bump my blood sugar levels up at all. This is real anecdotal, what they call N of one in a study research just done on myself, but that's my own personal experience. It might be different for other people. And monk fruit as well. Monk fruit is great too. Your worst, and sorry, allulose is one I should have added to that. The worst sweeteners are no brand names here. These are all chemical names: saccharin, aspartame, and sucralose. Lots of evidence that we should be avoiding those. So again, the ones that we should go for: stevia, erythritol, xylitol, and monk fruit. And the ones to avoid are saccharin, aspartame, and sucralose. So hopefully that's given you an idea, guys, of what kind of sweeteners to go for, which ones to avoid. They're not a get out of jail card. One thing I will say about sweeteners is they are better than sugar itself, although you could argue that from an overall general health point of view, aspartame is probably up there with sugar. It's probably as dangerous. Doesn't affect your blood sugar levels, but it is deleterious or harmful for your health overall. So I would use artificial sweeteners as a bridge for coming off a high sugar, high carb diet. I would use them sparingly, and I'd be careful about which ones I choose, because they're not all just super because they're not sugar. Although the marketing and the labeling around some of them would infer that they are. So I hope that's helped you guys. I'll be back in a couple of weeks' time. Chloe is back next week talking about the kind of neuroscience side of things. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the subscribe button. I'm going to do the wrong side because I always do. Subscribe is here and the bell notification is on the other side if you want to be reminded every time we go live. Have a good day. And like I say more recently, a saying that I might have stolen from somebody, but I love it. Eat like your life depends on it, because it does. Have a good week, and I'll see you all soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.